Hello, Daliso.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I always feel I'm lying when I say good. I'm as good as one can be in the current state of the world.
Yes, but that's still a very positive way to be. I like it.
Yes.
So
I'm not good compared to Daliso this time last year, but I'm good compared to Daliso this time 4 months ago.
That's good. I like that you're running a tab on it. That's nice. So just as the first little bit, for people that may not know you, and to be fair, that seems like not very many people at all, can you just give a quick rundown of your comedy career to date?
Yes. So I'm a stand-up comedian from Malawi. I started doing comedy in Canada, bounced around a bunch of countries like South Africa, eventually ended up in the UK, was a club comic for a very long time. And then 2017, I did Britain's Got Talent, came third. It kind of shifted my career. So I became more of like a touring comic, doing occasional television, and I got a radio show, and I write an absurd amount of jokes, and that's me.
Brilliant. Okay, so you mentioned Britain's Got Talent in 2017. If I remember rightly, you were Amanda Holden's golden buzzer.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
So,
this is true.
So how was that experience as a whole? That must be quite a surreal...
It was amazing, especially because I went in with very realistic expectations, right? Because I was like, well, look, I'm funny, so I'm going to go through, but I'm not going to do very well because I'm, at the time I was 37, right? I'm not like, I didn't feel I was like what the show wants. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like a young beginning of his career full of promise person. So I was like, I'll be in it and I'll do well. And all I really wanted from it was to get like a nice video clip I could use to get corporate shows. I didn't actually think I would do that well. So when I got the golden buzzer, it was just like so stunning. It was absolutely, I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't sleep. I was just too full of energy and just like calling everyone and excited. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely incredible. And I think looking at the clip, you can see how elated you were with it.
I couldn't believe what was going. Even when I walked out, I looked back on it and I'm like, why was I grinning so much? But I think it was also, there's this thing which people don't realize. If you've watched lots of video clips online of something and then you are suddenly in it, it feels so bizarre. Because I had watched loads of clips of people on BGT, and then I walked out and I was looking at them, and I felt like I was in the movie. I was having so much fun.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I can imagine it's quite hard to adjust to. Did you feel like a lot of pressure then at that moment? Was there a lot of nerves, or was it just another gig?
No. I'll be honest. Like the audition, zero pressure. If I was terrible, it never would have aired.
Right.
Because the way I looked at it is, if I'm bad, I'm a professional, and a bad professional is kind of mediocre, and they only air brilliant or atrocious.
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, even if I'm bad, I won't be good television bad. I'll be just kind of lukewarm, and so it won't make... So I felt no pressure. Even the semi-final, which I think was the best performance, I didn't really feel the pressure. I was just doing it to have fun. And then for the final, I was under so much pressure because I made a big mistake. I read what the bookies were saying and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, he's going to win. And then it gets in your head and then you stop having fun and it messes your performance up.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you didn't...
Not to say how much better I would have done without that stuff in my head, because I still did well. But I'm just saying that I was very stressed and I wasn't myself for the final. But no one is.
Right, okay. So I suppose the only way to...
£250,000! Trust me, no matter who you are, £250,000 possibly being in your pocket changes you.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, if you had put a bet against yourself, that would have been the only way to have got the happy medium, but no one wants to do that, do they?
No one wants.
So, so this podcast is all about the worst, weirdest, most embarrassing gigs you've ever done.
Yes.
And I mean, from my research, I can see you started out in Canada. You've performed pretty much all across the world.
Yes.
So I imagine you must have a couple of stories to tell. Is there any that stick in the front of your mind?
I do have a bunch of stories. Which one should I start with? The worst gig or the one which had the worst repercussions?
Oh, let's go worst gig and then move into repercussions.
Okay, so worst gig I did was, there is a Nigerian musician called Wizkid. Okay, Nigerian musician, and he was touring the UK, and he came to the dance house where his big music thing was, and I was asked to come along and to open for him, to do a little bit of comedy, to open for him. Now, this is people who have been waiting for over an hour and a half for the person they paid for the ticket for to show up, as opening act after opening act after opening act comes on. But at least those opening acts were musicians, right? So they got a little dancing, and they're like, where's Wizkid? They got a little dancing, where's Wizkid? Then the host, there's a host. The host introduces me. Doesn't say, welcome the comedian Daliso Chaponda. Just says, welcome Daliso Chaponda. I come out, they're expecting me to start singing. I just start saying jokes and bombing hard, not getting laughs, just totally awkward. And I realized, look, this isn't working. This is clearly not what you want. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. And I say this gracefully and leave gracefully. The host comes back on stage and says, hey, come on, guys. This guy is brilliant, okay? This guy is a very funny comedian. He's made his way down here. I'm going to bring him back on, right? I'm going to bring him back on because you guys need to appreciate the opportunity you have, and you need to listen to this guy. I come back on and I die again, right? But to make it worse, this time some people are giving me pity laughs. Ha, 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 ha. It was so horrible. And at least the first time I left gracefully, the second time I left in shame. Oh, that I think I would say is the worst gig. I have nightmares about it. It was so bad. It was so bad. And also, I'm not the kind of comic they like anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I was like a hip comic who wears gold chains and has that kind of, the same kind of vibe as the music, maybe I could have done well. But I'm like the opposite. I was the worst person to have.
No, I completely get that. I do comedy myself, and I've got 2 kids, a job, and that's the sort of stuff that I talk about. And I did a gig right next to Bristol Uni, and it was all uni students, and straight off the bat I thought, they can't relate to me. They're not going to enjoy it. And I was 100% right. But the host that brought you back on, did he check with you, or was it?
No.
He just insisted.
He thought he was helping. Never bring people back on. I mean, not on a bad gig, but I once did an amazing gig on a really tough night, and the foolish, people at the bar said, oh, bring him back on, not realizing I had only survived their bear pit by burning everything good.
Right, yeah.
So I went back on and I was bad. And so I ruined the momentum of being, So never bring people back unless they really ask you to. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's the worst gig. And where did you say that one was, by the way?
Manchester.
Oh, so that's in Manchester. Okay,
that was in Manchester, but not at a comedy club. The dance house is like it wasn't it was the Birdcage. The Birdcage, not the dance house. It's like a music venue, or like all sorts of weird things happen there.
Oh, okay. So that's the worst gig that you've ever done. What's the worst repercussions that you mentioned?
So I almost was arrested. So I did a gig in Malawi several years ago. Oh, it's funny, I don't even remember the year. Maybe it's something like 2012, 2003. I'm not sure. You can Google it. If you just put in Daliso arrested, you'll find it, right? This is to your listeners. So this is essentially, I did a show in Malawi where I did 2 jokes making fun of the government at the time, right? Okay. One was they just changed the flag. The Malawi flag used to be a rising sun, right? And they were like, we're no longer a rising sun. They turned it into a full sun, right? Okay. And so I mocked that by saying, we've got poverty problem. We've got people on strike. Maybe it should actually be an eclipse, right? Not the most revolutionary joke. I'm not trying to bring down the government. It's pretty tame in terms of like social commentary. And then I did another joke. At the time, my dad was in the Malawi government. So I made fun of my dad. It was really making fun of my dad by sort of, the joke was based on him being really hard on me when I was a kid, saying 5 A's, work harder, work harder, apply yourself, and always being hard on me. And then by the end of the joke, I read the newspapers and I read what's going on in Malawi, and he's in the government, and I'm like, work harder, apply yourself, work harder. And I use the same. So simple jokes where I'm not even being that specific, but that was enough. Front page of a newspaper. In fact, I've almost got to say, in retrospect, it wasn't actually me and my jokes which got me in trouble. It was the reporter's interpretation of my jokes. That's what I always hate about reporters, because they don't, if they review you, they don't put your joke down. There's no bubble which pops up. So all that exists is their version, right? And so the headline was Minister's Son Ridicules Government. Oh. And it described a much more revolutionary, much more critical version of my jokes, which were actually kind of cheeky. And the censorship board called, and they actually called my producer, started asking where I was. There was like, my dad got in trouble because he was in the government. They yelled at him, telling him, why can't he control me? And he was afraid he was going to be fired. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare for several days. And I was also just worried. Now, look, because my dad's in the government, I wasn't at risk in that if I was arrested, he would be able to get me out. But at the same time, let's say you're in custody for 6 hours. A lot can happen in 6 hours, right? And that was what I was scared of, especially if you're someone like me who doesn't speak good Chichewa, and I would do terribly in a Malawian prison. And it was more like, even if it's just a few hours, it could get real. So that was really scary.
So how was it in the end? How was that experience then? How long were you detained?
Oh, no, I wasn't detained. It was just lots of calls, and then we had to go to their head office of the censorship board and have a conversation with them.
Oh, okay.
And then we had to submit a script of the next show, and then they came to watch the next show, because our big argument was that we didn't say the things this reporter says we're saying. That was not what I said. That's their weird interpretation of what they think I said. So they're like, really? Well, then we're coming to the next show. So they came to the show. I put them in the front, and I read out the letter from the censorship board to me in front of everybody.
Right. Which
got big laughs, but also in a way kind of took some of the power off them. Mm-hmm. Because in the room, this was the other thing, in the room, I turned it into a joke later, but honestly, in the room, they were like people from the UN, people from the US Embassy, British Embassy. There were all sorts of people in the room. Now that I've said that they're watching me, if they arrested me, that's a bigger story than it would have been. So we kind of took the teeth out of them, but in their defense, they actually were just doing their job, and they just didn't know what to do with comedy. Because you've got to understand, there was no other comedians in Malawi, and everything else the censorship does is very clear-cut. They get a magazine like Hustler. Nudity, very clear, block it out, right?
Yeah.
If they come across a book which has racist things in it, very clear-cut, block it out. But what do they do when I'm talking about sex? Or what do they do when I'm talking about race, and the race I'm talking about seems to be laughing? It's very hard for them to gauge. In fact, it's very hard for everyone to gauge. People, to this day, everywhere in the world are still arguing about what's okay and not okay in comedy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So the censorship board, so they're in the front row at this gig. Did you catch them laughing along with it?
Yes.
Or were they?
Yes.
You did?
And in fact, they loved the bits which I did making fun of them. Because I was saying that, I remember one of the jokes was about how they make sure there's no porn, because porn makes our minds perverse, right? And they said yes. But you're watching all the porn, so you must have the most perverse minds of all. And they laughed. So it was very chummy. I realized I was safe once I was talking to them. And it was also one of those things where you've also got to understand, people often don't understand repressive societies. Like, I've done gigs in Zimbabwe as well when Mugabe was in power.
Oh, okay.
And the truth is, Mugabe is not the one who gets you in trouble. It's some underling who wants to show off to Mugabe.
Right. Okay.
Most of these big guys, except some very sensitive ones like Trump, most people could not care less that you're making jokes about them, right? But there are lots of yes men who want to show, oh, I am your best follower, dear leader. Look what I did to your follower, the guy who was making fun of you. So those guys are actually far more dangerous than the people in power.
Oh, okay. So when you go to these places and you've got those sorts of yes men around, does it put you on edge at all, or are you still yourself with the same act, or do you find you censor it a bit?
I personally grew up with my father in the UN, and I don't know, I understand diplomacy. Maybe I have delusions of grandeur, but I don't feel like I offend or get people in trouble because I know what I'm doing. Yeah. But I've seen other people get in trouble.
Oh, really?
Because there's a line. There's a line. You know what I mean? There's that thing. It's about just knowing what's diplomatic and what's too far. And also understanding that too far is different in different countries. Mm-hmm. So in the UK, right, you can make fun of individuals as much as you want, right? Yeah. Make fun of even sacred individuals. You can make fun of the Queen. You can make fun of individuals, the Prime Minister, everything, right? But you don't make fun of groups, or you got to be very careful if you're making fun of like a minority group, be it homosexuals, be it black people. It's groups where you will get in trouble. Head over to South Africa, head over to Malawi. Make fun of groups as much as you want. Do all the accents you want, right? But when you make fun of protected, powerful individuals, that's when you get in trouble. If you make fun of that prophet or that politician, that's when you get in trouble. So it's just like, it's understanding the different rules in different countries, right? Like UK, right? Make as many atheistic jokes as you like, right? You can literally swear about God, right? But you can't do a transphobic joke, right? Yeah. Go to Dubai, do as many transphobic jokes as you like, but mention God, things are going to get real. Yeah. So it's being able to understand that everything, every place. People think they're more free. I just think different places have different things which aren't allowed to be said. Okay, so you've obviously experienced that from loads of different cultures of gigs. Yes. Do you have a method that you prefer, or is it just sort of as and when suits will play to the crowd? I don't mind as long as I can assess the crowd. In fact, one of my other really bad gigs was in Uganda, right? Okay. And it was partly because it was a situation where it was a mixture of crowds and it was hard to diagnose what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So what I mean is, for example, when you've got different income brackets, different age groups, different, like, it's very hard to gauge what's okay, because what's okay for those ones isn't okay for those ones. And one of the worst gigs of my life was in Uganda. I did a gig, and I will also say the person before me did a dance competition. Right? Okay. So he had like a big booty dance competition, almost like a twerking competition. He had good-looking women come and shake their booty with him. From the audience? From the audience. It was like a competition, and the winner got a drink, like a bottle of champagne or something like that. Right. The crowd was screaming. It was raucous. It was sheer insanity, right? Yeah. It wasn't comedy. It was just sheer insanity. But they were screaming and loud and and then I come on and start trying to talk politics, right? In very divisive ways. Oh my God. Oh, they just started talking in the it was just bad. It was just bad. And it was one of those things where either if I had judged the jokes differently, or if I had been before the dance competition, it might have been better. But, I still feel the pain. You know, bad gigs, you have flashbacks. Like, yeah. The guy that did the dance off, was it supposed to be comedy, or was he just... No. He's a comedian, right? It's just, you've got to understand there are different styles of comedy. Almost like, have you ever watched a Bollywood movie? Yes. Yeah. Now, it's a movie, but it's very different in terms of its rules and archetypes from a Hollywood movie, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Similarly, some African comedy follows different rules. It's almost closer to like Benny Hill or something like that, where it's all about slapstick and over-the-top things like having a dance contest where people are dancing and there are people laughing because one person's bad at dancing, the other person. But it's not about this guy saying intelligent things which make people laugh. It's about them creating situations and poking fun at things and then falling over, and it's very different, right?
Yeah.
But this guy was very good at that style, and this crowd loves that style, and then here I come with my style, and oof, it's rough.
Yeah, I can imagine that must have been hard to transition.
To be fair, I think I could take him now, because again, I think as you get older and as you've been a comedian for longer, you start learning how you can reset the room.
Right, okay.
Right? And so, you know, people who say, oh, you can't follow that person, you can't follow that person, they've just not learned how to reset the room yet. Now I think I could reset the room.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
You almost take a few minutes, and before your first joke, you take around 3 minutes observing things and changing the temperature and talking about the dance and whatever, and just kind of getting them into your world, and then you start. But I came out, okay, here's my best gag! And they're still cheering the dance. And it was a disaster. But again, the whole point is, like, there's some comics who are so experienced, who've been going for 30 years. It doesn't matter what's going on. A bomb's just gone off outside. They can keep going. It's like you learn, and I've still not learned. I still get thrown by a few things, but I've learned a lot of situations now. So
do you think now, if you were faced with the Manchester Birdcage gig, do you think you would reset that room, or was that too far removed from...
I'll tell you how I could do the Manchester Birdcage. Yeah. Only because I did Britain's Got Talent.
Okay.
Because I will tell you what's interesting is when you've got a bad gig, like it's a corporate or it's a Christmas gig, you have to lean really heavy on the TV, right? Right. You almost have to tell the toast, introduce me as... from Britain's Got Talent, the Britain's Got Talent guy who did Britain's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent. Welcome, Britain's Got Talent, Daliso Chaponda. And then you just talk about that, because there's a way that even in these crazy gigs where they're waiting for their singer, they'll be like, oh, that guy was on TV, I remember him. What's it? But they don't want you to talk about anything else, right? I literally did a thing I shouldn't have been booked for, which was... it was a trade fair, and it was like a Muslim trade fair. I'm not Muslim, right? But I guess because I make fun of, BNP and stuff, we've got a lot of commonalities. But I showed up, and I quickly realized, why am I here, right? I don't belong here. And then I went on stage, I did a gag, it wasn't working. I did another gag, it wasn't working. And then I just turned it into a Q&A. Well, I was like, oh, do you have any questions? And it became a questions about BGT. Oh, what's Simon Cowell like? What? And honestly, it will save you when gigs are messed up, right? So that's what I would say. Birdcage, I couldn't win it over with comedy. I could just win it over by doing that.
Right, okay. Fair play. I mean,
even then, there are some gigs where I still can't win over. There's something like, look, if I'm ever hired for do you remember there was a gig which threw pieces of bread at Nish Kumar?
Oh, I've heard the story, yeah.
I couldn't do that gig, right? There's some gigs where you're like, you're not the guy, right? They need Bernard Manning, right? There's some gigs where you're like, you're just not the guy.
Yeah, we've had several gig stories on this podcast so far where they say that you're not the person that they need, and normally they tend to center around Christmas gigs or golf club gentlemen's day sort of gigs.
Yes, often I think either they need someone who's louder or I've been going 20 years. You got to know I've got so many bad gig stories. Possibly in the top 3 is I did a gig in a strip club in Montreal, right? Okay. And when I was on stage, one of the strippers, her name was Tangerine Dream. right?
Right.
And she had a gigantic chest, and she had been on porn movies. So she was like the headliner. It's like comedy. They've got the opening, I think, what the headliner, right? And she sees that, I guess she thinks I'm having a hard time or something, and decides to help me. And runs on stage and starts like trying to do, oh my God, it was so bad. It was so bad. It was so bad. And what was funny was I wasn't the last comedian. I was going on, and then this friend of mine, Sugar Sammy, who's brilliant, was going to go on next. But he watched this. He said, hey, I'm not going on. And I was like, you clever bastard. You clever bastard. So only I died that day.
So in a strip club, comedy in a strip club, where I'm not sure how that was ever supposed to work in the first place.
No, it's worked. I'll tell you where it's worked, right? So I did one in Birmingham at a place called Silhouettes.
Okay.
And what you've got to understand, have you been to strip clubs?
No.
Never.
And I'm not being modest just for the podcast either. I genuinely haven't stepped foot in one.
In your life?
No.
How old are you?
I'm 28.
Never a stag do or something?
No, honestly, I swear I'm not lying. I haven't.
Oh, no. Well, okay. Well, then you don't know this. Strip clubs don't have continuous dancing, right?
Okay.
It's not like strip. So in between the dance reviews, people go to the bar, they drink, they chat, they do it. Then, welcome to stage, Lola, right? Now, some strip clubs get the idea that, in that little in-between bit, let's get a comic.
Okay.
Right? And so a girl will do a dance, and then you'll come on in. And I'll tell you what's weird is, often you end up doing better than the girls, right? not, I just mean in terms of like, nudity is fine, and it's hot, but it gets boring. It's the same thing all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's only so long you can go, That's almost why they have the break, because it has diminishing returns. So they'll do that, then you'll do some comedy, make them laugh, and then you'll introduce another girl. She'll dance, and then it works, right? But it's so different. It depends on the room. It depends on the sound, depends on the lighting. There's so many things that make it work sometimes and not work sometimes. But at the one in Montreal, it was not working. It was not working. And also, it depends how desperate the audience are. I think the ones in Montreal, they'd come for one thing.
So at the start of that story, you mentioned that the Montreal Strip Club was one of three, right, in your top three. So are the other two that you mentioned already in that top three?
No. Yes. So I would say the Uganda gig and the was one of the three worst, and definitely the comeback on stage before WizKid was. Yeah. So I've done all top three.
You've done all top three. Great. Brilliant.
I say that, but you know what's funny is that I think you know this. They are endless font of bad gigs. And the more you talk, the more you're like, I forgot that one. But this is, now I don't know if you have comedians listening. Please, any starting out comedians, you've got to understand, other comedians only want to hear about your bad gigs. If we start sharing bad gig stories and you are like, and you tell a story where you turn it around at the end, we don't want to hear that.
No.
We are sharing pain.
Yeah.
And there's always one person in the green room who doesn't get it. And instead tells those starts out bad, but then I saved it stories.
Yeah. No one wants them. No one wants to know the bits where you nearly fell over. They don't want to see where you fell over.
I mean, I think I've told them now, but this is a podcast, but we're not just sharing the death.
Yeah. Lovely. So what I do now then, there's a lot to cover here, and I really like that, because what I do now at the end of the podcast is I give you a collective score for your stories. Okay. And the score is out of 15, broken down into 3 sections. Okay. So the 3 sections are the story's cringeworthiness, which I'm still not sure is an actual word, but I do like it.
Hey, go back on stage. That makes me cringe even now, years later.
We got mental scars. Any mental scars it's left, and you've already said that you get flashbacks and
I do, but at the same time, I'm a pretty quick bounce back kind of person, right?
Oh, okay.
I have a bad gig, the next day I'm laughing. You know what I mean? Like I'm not one of these people who nurse it for days and days and days.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, they're funny memories. They were stressful at the time. And maybe like an hour after the gig, I was upset, but I don't let, you've got so much going on in your life. And the other thing I don't realize is people who have more good gigs than bad gigs, why do they let bad gigs let them down? Because clearly your batting average is high. Yes. If it was more bad gigs than good gigs, then I understand the stress.
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's a very healthy outlook towards it.
Oh! Ladies and gentlemen, how could I forget this one? We need to revise the list. Okay. I invited a date to come watch me perform.
Right.
This was very early on, right? She was very attractive. I was very interested. I start doing my jokes, and I realize as I start a joke, it's very misogynistic.
Right.
So I attempt to rewind out of the joke. By doing that, I forget all my jokes. Right? Because early on, you can't jump around. This joke leads to this joke. This joke leads to this joke. It's like a string. I pulled out this one and I forgot everything. And I just end up on stage. I've forgotten my jokes. I've forgotten my jokes. Oh my God. It was so terrible. I would have impressed her more by just doing the misogynistic joke. Oh.
How did it go the day after that?
Oh no, we ended up dating.
Oh, okay. Oh, it didn't affect it too much.
No. It did make her not impressed. For a long time, she would refuse to come to my gigs, and she just thought I was a bad comedian.
Right. Okay.
Right. So, but thankfully, she wasn't in it for the laughs.
Yeah.
But I beg her to bring friends, and she's like, no. I'd be like, I need people to come see me. She's like, no, I won't tell my friends. And I was like, she thinks I'm a bad comedian.
She might have thought you were a great comedian just with a terrible memory.
This is true.
Okay, all right. I've got to factor that one in now. Dategate, I'm calling that one. We've got to factor in Dategate.
God.
So, I mean, mental scars is going to be a low score of 2 out of 5 because of the very healthy attitude you have towards it.
Yes.
The cringeworthiness. And I can't even pick one of these off because you've got the Tangerine Dream, we got the Uganda Dance-Off, you've got Dategate, and you've got Come Back On.
I think, for me personally, for my cringe most was Come Back On.
That was the highest for you,
because that was like a scene in a horror movie, because I knew what was going to happen. When he called me back on, I knew, and I still had to walk out.
Well, I mean, there will be outrage if I score you anything below 5 out of 5. Cringeworthy, I am sure.
Yes.
And the last one is how these stories have changed you as a person, and that's really one that only you can answer. So how do you feel those have changed you?
I think that I am a much better comedian because of bad experiences. Because I'm one of these comedians who, if I have a bad gig, I go home and I try to think of how I could have done it different, right? Because I hate the experience so much that I'm like, that's never going to happen again. If a dance-off happens again, I'm ready for it, right?
Yeah.
If some idiot brings me back on stage, I'm ready for it. So I think they've made me a better comedian. I don't think they've made me a better human being, really. I don't think that I'm one of these people who... I think they would have had to have scarred me more in terms of shaping me as a person, but they've definitely all made me a better comedian.
Right. Okay. Well, this is unprecedented, and I've not done this before.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the option to score yourself out of 5 for how you feel it changed you as a person.
I would say I'll give it a 3, because even
3.
though it's made me a much better comedian, you mean how it's changed you generally, like in your life, not just in comedy, right?
Yeah, sort of a collective of it, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's for me, I'm like almost separation of church and state. There's stuff which affects me as a comedian and stuff which affect me in life, and very rarely are they similar, right? Like my breakup with that girlfriend eventually who saw me at Dategate, that would change me as a person, but the actual gigs don't really change me. So yeah, right in the middle.
Right, so 3 out of 5, we're going for that. So collectively, that means that you have got a score of 10 out of 15. How do you feel about that?
Okay, I'll take it. Now, what are you trying to achieve? Because in a weird way, I almost think the person who gets 0 is a lucky person.
That's it. We're yet to figure out whether it's better to be higher or lower.
I think you want to have a low score because that would mean you've been relatively unscarred.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, 10 out of 15, I think that puts you safely in the middle somewhere.
Yes.
So that's good. That's good. Thank you very much for coming on and doing this. Before you go, is there anything you want to push? How can people find you?
Yes. So just go to africancomedian.com. I'm doing all sorts of things. I do a streamed comedy show every day. I've got like a DVD out. There's all sorts of things, but it's all at africancomedian.com, including free clips of comedy, free clips.
Brilliant. Lovely. Yeah, definitely go and check that out, listeners. But yeah, once again, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you. And I'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.